Okay,
Just
our
fine.
readers today are Francesca Bell and Anders Carlson-Wee. Francesca will be reading first from this complex, beautiful book, What Small Sound. And there are many things that strike me about this book, but one that immediately comes to me is the first line of the book says that a woman gets raped every 2 minutes in the United States. And the last poem in the book has a man speaking to the poet, saying, "You're still young, you're still beautiful." And she's thinking that she cares neither for him nor for her beauty, because the essence of her is freed beneath beauty, beneath sexual allure. So that immediately strikes me. There's a lot of pain in this book. Pain in the world, which of course doesn't need any explanation from me, but the pain in the world is evident in this book, and personal pain. A daughter who is bending all her efforts on suicide, a son who has been hurt, concussed, and seems to be somewhat disabled. And another thing that strikes me about the book is the poet's realization of her privilege, what it means to be rich in a world where there's poverty. There's a poem I was looking for, I couldn't re-find the title, in which she gives money to a young man who is black, and a black woman who had left when she came. She said, "Sure, you can sit down," and immediately left, comes back. And the pain of that, the pain the poet feels. And finally, because I can't go on talking,
That's right.
the poems have, for me, an almost arrowed feel. They're beautifully constructed, and they come like an arrow to their target. So let's give her a warm welcome, Francesca.
You guys are in for an amazing experience when he gets up here. So I'm actually going to read poems that have little to do with those themes. I thought maybe you all wouldn't like to seek counseling after the reading. And so I grew up with a mother who was slowly going deaf almost for as long as I can remember. And then when I was 24, I started to lose my own hearing, and I wear hearing aids in both ears now. And I noticed when I was arranging the poems for today's reading that so many of the poems in this book actually have to do with sound. I'm clearly preoccupied with that since I was little. So each of these poems from this book has to do with sound. Late blooming. Mid-January, and still the last amaryllis refuses. Planted in October, it just now raises a green bud tip to the bright window. Inside the plain package waits a blaring red, the flower furled, held like breath in the trumpeter's body. So I was a massage therapist for 4.5 years, and strangely, I've written just 2 poems about that experience, it's a rich experience being a young female massage therapist, and they both have a lot of sound in them. instrument left in its case. My life sucks, but my wife won't, he said, rolling onto his back on my massage table. He laughed, a painful choke, as his penis slowly rose, a quiet question tenting the flannel sheet. I think he wanted not to be blown, but played, trapped song coaxed from him by careful embouchure and another's breath. I heard the faint thrum of his loneliness all the way home. And that really was the overarching theme of my years as a massage therapist, is the deep loneliness people carry in their bodies. I leave my window open now to hear them. Nights, I hear barn owls calling, shrill as hunger stripped bare, and think of the onion farmer from east of the mountains, his broad, exhausted body on my massage table. The owl, he told me, screamed all winter from his barn rafters. He said the sound made the cold colder when he trudged from field to barn to house. After I touched all the places I was licensed to, bunched tender shoulders that crept toward his ears, beat up hands, leathery as a dog's paw pads, each buttock's lonely hillock giving gently beneath my forearm's strokes. He sat up and asked if I'd have sex with him. He promised not to hurt me, to buy me dinner after. He said it plain, did not look away. But I was 20 and knew nothing of desolation or owls or wintering over onions or of a farmer pacing ugly acres as layer upon layer of stinging, weeping sweetness forms beneath the frozen solid ground. So this poem was inspired by an article I read in the Smithsonian about whales and their vocalizations. But of course it's not really about that. Love is a song you listen to later. Reading about whales, captive beluga who tried to learn to talk, blue whales calling to each other across entire oceans. I think how like that beluga I was. My adolescence spent trying to decrypt isolation. If you played my efforts back the way they play back the beluga's recordings, there would be a haunting gibberish, something that sounds like speech, but carries no meaning. At 17, when I met the boy, I was a strange white whale behind aquarium glass, my face pressed to transparent confinement, a sadness eddying and sinking. Slowly, mouth to mouth, he made me human. Sounds we shared became words, language, an incantation. It's years since he left my solitude for his bright lit life, but I hear him from across time's littered floor when I slide again into a darkness so complete I needn't bother having eyes. His voice still the hand on my elbow in the room of strangers. I always yield to the temptation to reveal that this is about the same boy. This next one. Yeah, sometimes there's just someone that really touches you early on, and you don't recover. The sound when the held note ceases. Tonight I contemplate 30 years late, his dark head cradled in my lap. Teenage boy from band snuck back with me to our grade school playground, middle of a bitter night, and him telling me he'd been adopted twice, and me considering the mother who gave him up, the one who died when he was 2, and finally, one who lasted. Her voice cool when I'd called for him that afternoon. We sat cross-legged in the cold as he pulled open the heavy doors of my coat and made quick work of my buttons, solving easily the puzzle of the front clasp on my bra. He sighed to see my breasts spring free, pale and rising in the frigid air, then leaned across my lap and settled in, my arms around him, his body stretched upon the frozen ground. His lips grazed one nipple before enveloping it, as I'd watched him hold each woodwind he prepared to play. When he began to suck, his eyes slid shut, one hand slack above my heart. Other mouths had touched me there, but none ever pulled this sweetness up. It welled in me like sorrow or satiety, like tears one almost weeps. So far beyond desire, I nursed him in the moonlit schoolyard and felt a hollowing hunger I couldn't name, a wistful, tender longing even 30 years would fail to slake. I held him, rocking a little as we fell through the ravenous, murmuring dark of our separate aches. Now you will know that I apparently had a weakness for musicians when I was young. Tutor. I required finally a boy with 12 years of piano lessons, singing in his hands, and the girlfriend before me who taught him to play scales up and down her body. He reached casually between my legs, without needing to look, to place one practiced finger on my clitoris and press as if freeing a clear note from his piano. My body did the rest, bucking against him, then arching with an involuntary, jubilant moan. I lay after, amazed and chagrined to think of pleasure, a spring coiled all that time in my body. So I'm just going to read a couple more of my poems, and then I'm going to read from a new translation I have out. And these next 2 poems are about my own hearing loss. And I got hearing aids about 6 years ago, about 10 years later than I should have had them. And it was kind of shocking to me that they're good and wonderful, but they were hard to get used to after a lot of years of hearing loss. Hush. Evenings, sick of acuity and its cost, I'd pull at my hearing aids until what entered each ear slides slowly out, drawing sound along with it. Deafness a relief, as when I've had all I can take of pleasure and push my lover from my body. The world, it's true, is less, absent the part of him that fills and empties me at once. Ecstasy and overwhelm, like life's din, played by the devices in my head. Insistent music I finally writhe away from. And so one thing that's awful about losing your hearing is you continuously have to have it tested, which means you're always failing. And I wrote this after, it was kind of, I guess, partway through the pandemic, and I just found out I'd lost 15% more in both ears. And that was upsetting. So the title is the first line. After the hearing test, it's 2 days before I cry. Grief sneaks up on me now, the way sound does. My ability to mourn as sluggish as my inner ears. Cilia do not rejuvenate. We have that in common. I won't mind losing the clamor of cocktail parties, high grind of the dentist's drill, triggering retch of other people's vomit. But I'd like to keep Telemann's trumpet concerto in D, the tiny chuff my python makes up close to my ear, the calls of 2 Canada geese as they circled the slough this morning, seeming lost, their cries trailing them like a woman's heavy train, and the indecipherable murmur of my beloved's voice as she held my hand while the bear ate my baked beans just outside our tent. Though I could not make out her assurances, may they burble over me forever. Loss accrues, the geese can tell you. It compounds like interest. O world, leave me slowly. Let me dally over each diminishing return. And now for something entirely different. This is a new translation. It came out, I don't know, I guess a month and a half or so ago. I've been translating the poems of a German poet named Max Sessner for about 5 years now. And my work has culminated in this amazing book that Red Hand published. So Max is about 64 now, and he has lived his whole life in southern Germany. I didn't know it when I first approached him, but he is like me, he's mostly uneducated. He didn't attend college, and also like me, he lives on the outskirts of the literary world, on his own terms. I like to think of him living by a river, figuratively. And you're really in for a treat. I just adore his work. And I was telling Anders before we came, it's such a pleasure to be reading someone else's work because you can feel more unabashedly proud. So I'm going to start with this. He has a lot of dogs in his poems, and this is one of his dog poems. In the cafe, for Joe. This dog, how he looks at me as if we must have known each other. I pay, and we chat a little longer. Once we were like brothers, he says, and lays his paw on my knee. That was long ago. And if you don't remember anymore, I can understand. But I still see everything before me as if it were yesterday. The old hick town and us forever young. But in the end, I, mouth still full of morning air, totaled the car and myself. Your grief was great, and your tears genuine. Many years have vanished, and today, what a surprise. We run into each other again. Do you have children? Are you a happy man? Tell me fast, before we lose each other. Someone is already pulling on my leash. And what about you? Shouldn't you already be home by now? So something that Max does very well, I haven't seen anyone who does it better, is he plays with time in his poems so that you really experience the feeling of the past and the present and the future happening all at once. And this is one of my favorites, favorite examples of that. Apparitions. Today I saw you on the street as an old woman. You walked past me, and I, who died before you, saw myself mirrored in your glasses as a young man. You looked right through me with a gaze as if from an open window, out of which you will soon jump, down onto this street in front of a moving car whose driver looks like me. And I wanted to read the poem I took the title from. So the book is called Whoever Drowned Here. And it turns out there's quite a bit of water and some drownings that go across the 3 books that I pulled poems from, and then also Max's new work, which is included here. Swimming. Now it is still on the little lake, mid-August. The shadows have deserted the trees and have first wandered to the shore and then dived under to the bottom. It makes the water light. If one approaches from the village, the lake in the distance looks like an eye that stares into the sky. Beginning in August, it's the melancholy that drives me to go swimming after work. Until far into the dusk, I lie on my back and let myself be carried. See on land the beacons of the cigarettes. Whoever drowned here, always, years after, came back. So like many of us, Max has a preoccupation with writing about death, but this is a bit of a comical take on it. A tidy guest. Death is already trying on your clothes and walks around the apartment in them while you sleep. In your best suit, he mugs before the mirror. He is well-bred and tidy. Furthermore, he loves sweets and sinks his teeth into your chocolate supply. A bad habit, as he admits, but for it you receive a few days gratis, and he even waters your miserable houseplants before he goes. And you awaken a barely discernible smell of moist earth hanging in your laundry, and your pants pinch suddenly with each step as you go down the stairs. What a peculiar morning, you think. And you don't feel comfortable in your own skin that actually doesn't belong to you anymore, and like a borrowed coat, doesn't quite go with your shoes. So many of us will be joining our families I guess it's actually this week. I'm going to be preparing a giant meal, and I don't even know which week it is. And so I couldn't not read this poem about being in the bosom of one's family. In the circle of the family, Grandpa turned 80, and everyone came. Every adult is a short, rhyming poem. On this day, the children scurry like commas through the house. Small, mysterious anthology, I cannot read you without getting tired. My eyes always close after the foreword. Never will I discover why I'm here. Already there, where the bookmark is tucked, there's no one who knows me. So one thing I've really loved about translating this work is that Max very often centers elderly people in his work. And I think a lot of people write about aging, but I think we often center younger people, and Max really doesn't, even in his early work. Portrait of an old woman sitting on a park bench. In passing, one sees behind her face that's still beautiful, a second younger one, then a third, a fourth, and last, somewhat smaller, the face of a girl. And if a lover long since lost kissed her now, passing as I did by chance, her first face would open up, and all the others would fall between her feet like coins from a purse into the gravel. So I'm just going to read a few more poems, and I want to highlight another aspect of Sessner's work, which is that he always says, I accuse him of surrealism or magical realism, because he writes very often of kind of the secret lives of inanimate objects. And he says, and at least one of his reviewers in Germany says, that actually he writes nothing that is surreal. He's just a better observer than the rest of us are. Things. If we don't love things, they haunt us. One day they fall out of their world into ours, and a smell clings to them that we don't know. The stuffed dog lost a long time ago, one-eyed and with only 3 legs left, sat one morning next to our bed. He spoke to you with my voice. How alien we suddenly were to each other. The morning sun cast my head as a shadow on the wall, and it resembled a coffee cup that you loved and that I threw to the floor once in a rage. Broken into 100 shards, it took to the road. On that day, I saw them everywhere, returned. They took possession of us. Dolls, naked and without heads, waved to us, and toy clocks displayed toy time. I rode away from you on a bicycle that was eaten away, half by rust and half by sadness. Table. Today, I am the table at which you sit. Yesterday, I was something else, but I can do tables the best. Of all furniture, I like them the most, but only the wooden ones, which remind me of old dogs that watch over our sleep, loyal and philosophical. My minor talent fails at chairs, too complicated. I've tried. Never have I managed a flawless exemplar. Tables, on the other hand, I can do from a standing start. And you just propped your elbows on me, laid your head in your hands, and are looking down at me. I don't feel so very comfortable with it. Your glance has, after all, something reckless, and I feel a pricking in the wood as you abruptly pull out the drawer. It is completely empty. Forgive me this small vanity. And I'm going to close with the poem I first fell in love with. I'd been looking for a poet to translate from German. I was an exchange student, so I'm rusty but relatively fluent in German. I looked for about 2.5 years and just nothing grabbed me. And then I found 12 of Max's poems in an Austrian literary journal called Manuskripte. And this was the first one I read, and I thought, this is it. He's the one. While leaving the cafe, the girl takes the umbrella, or does the umbrella take the girl, lead her out into the wet evening, and touch her softly on the hand? Seeing them from a distance, one thinks of lovers. The wind plays with the girl's hair, and the umbrella is speechless with joy. Thank you.
Really good.
Our next poet is Anders Carlson-Wee. His new book, which is his third book, is Disease of Kings, which is gout. Seems to me an irony there. The two buddies, North and the speaker, whose name is never, he just talks, his name is never, we don't know his name. But North develops gout, which we're told is the disease of overindulgence, too much meat. But these two guys, North and the speaker, are hustlers who live off dumpsters, who find stuff in the street and collect it and then sell it in moving sales, which in one of the poems, moving sales as opposed to garden sales, people get really hungry at moving sale. But these guys are living pennilessly, and yet North develops this disease of richness, which then disappears. There's no explanation of that. North, who seems to be a big, powerful guy who fishes, He goes up north to fish, I guess, for salmon. And deserts the I, the speaker. And the book ends with a strange connection. The market where the dumpster, his main dumpster, he's getting messages telling him where the good stuff is a connection that the book ends on with no further explanation, all of which seems to me about, although it's rough and ready, it doesn't explain itself. It goes directly to the points of its poems, but it's about loneliness, it's about disconnection. The speaker's father is a preacher, and he evidently completely negates all that. So he is alone. He's alone in emptiness and valueness. Irony. Let's give him a warm welcome and his poetry.
All right, everybody hear me okay? Good. Thank you, Richard, for the lovely introduction. And let's have another round for Francesca.
Oh, yeah.
It's wonderful to be here. Glad to be sharing some poems with you all. I'll explain some of the narrative elements of the book as we go along. This first poem is the first one in the collection, and it's called Hired. The grandam's window rolled down, but it was too dark out to see in. A hand waved me over. A voice asked if I wanted to make some quick cash, standing right where I was standing for the next 10 minutes. Simple as that. Just stand here, I said. Simple as that, the voice said, and the hand stretched out a 20. It was weirdly humiliating, doing what I was already doing. Like being told to act natural on camera and sensing that who you are is failing to entertain. 10 minutes passed, 15, 20. Hey, I'd never made so much in such little time. Never been so nervous, doing nothing. I kept needing the car to come back. Some sign it was over. A horn, a gunshot, the rising pitch of oncoming sirens. I could accept I'd never know what I'd been used for, but I wanted proof it was finished. So there's a little bit of irony in the first poem in the collection being titled Hired, because as Richard brought up, the two characters you're following are these two young men who don't want to partake in society in any normal ways, and they certainly don't want jobs. They're very committed to free time, and they sort of see free time as the ultimate form of freedom. And so they're avoiding work at sort of great cost in a way. They dumpster dive for all their food, and for their clothing, for shoes, whatever they need. They're kind of getting it all from the trash. And if they need some cash, they kind of come up with a hustle for how to come by some cash by selling the things they find. So that's sort of the world you're in and the two characters you're following. I'd like to give a little shout out to my aunt and uncle who are here in the back. Yeah, let's have a little round for them. Yeah. Thank you for coming. Janet is my aunt, and this book is dedicated to my grandpa, Roald Carlson, who's Janet's dad. And the reason it's dedicated to my grandpa is because he was a very frugal person. I grew up in Madagascar. I grew up in the Depression, and taught me a lot about frugality when I was a child. My first gift that I remember getting from him was a fan. I had a childhood bedroom that was stuffy, and he found a fan in a dumpster and fixed the wiring, and then gave it to me, and that was my fan in my childhood bedroom. And so I sort of had some schooling in frugality from a young age. And this next poem kind of digs into some of that, some sort of an origin story for my own personal frugality. It takes place in northern Minnesota, which is where I'm from. I'm from Moorhead. I don't know if you all know Fargo, the movie Fargo. And basically, Moorhead is attached to Fargo. So it's that kind of climate. It's like -40 wind chill. In the winter, you can't wait outside for the school bus. So children wait inside their homes, and the school bus will park somewhere, and then everybody will run out. So getting to school takes forever. Because there's always some mom being like, Jimmy's coming, or whatever. So there's a lot of delays and stuff. And this poem is set in that winter environment. And the one other thing, I have a question for you all. If I were to take a cup and go to a soda fountain and fill the cup with every different type of soda, what would you call that drink? Suicide? Did someone say something else too? Sarsaparilla, nice. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard that one before. So suicide, I think, is the most common. Where I grew up, we called it a graveyard.
I never heard that.
This one's called cups. Hovering near the line, I watch a lady order coffee and ask for a second empty cup. But once she has the cup in hand, she thinks better of it and, leaving, drops it in the trash. I know about cups. They're trees, ground to a pulp and coated with thin skins of plastic, not unlike condoms, that make recycling impossible. In 9th grade, I kept a Subway cup in my locker and cradled it each day at lunch beneath my coat as I trudged through sub-zero winds and gusting snows to the franchise, where I'd blend in with the crowd who'd already ordered, then step boldly toward the soda fountain, which was patrolled by the staff, and fill my cup with Sprite, Dr. Pepper, Mellow Yellow, Cherry Coke, making what we called a graveyard. I had the cup so long, I named him, bathed him daily at the drinking fountain near the gym, and I never let his lip get torn or pinched. What stopped all this was Subway updating its logo. Instantly, my cup looked old and wrong, and I couldn't keep making my graveyard. Unless I was willing to switch to a new cup, which I was, and did. So that's how I think. So in the first part of this collection, you're following the speaker and his friend North as they sort of have these little scams going. They're throwing fake moving sales, but not actually moving. They're convinced shoppers are more excited because it's like last chance kind of energy. And they're dumpster diving for their food and stuff. And they sort of have this shared worldview about free time and the sense that they don't want to work and don't want to participate in society in traditional ways. But they have very different relationships with their families. The speaker, both of his parents are Lutheran pastors and sort of are there to give him handouts if he runs into trouble doing this sort of money-free lifestyle. Meanwhile, his friend North not only does not have a safety net, but he's also providing for an alcoholic father. So they have these very different dynamics. And this next poem draws some of those themes out. It also looks at one of the ways they avoid the monetary system altogether. This one's called Snow. It was the law. You had 4 hours after snowfall to get your sidewalk cleared. Our landlord hated the chore so much, he paid us $5 per inch toward rent. North shoveled. I came behind with salt that glowed in the streetlights like a second snow, as if we were unmaking and remaking the conditions. That winter, North's dad disappeared again, but this time, North didn't bother to report it. Thanksgiving passed. Christmas came and went. It's deep, but it's easy, North said one night, tossing load after load over his shoulder, the powder twisting in the sky and shushing against his coat. Each time the snow let up, we pored over weather reports, hoping for blizzards. If it keeps up like this, I said, February will be free. In March, his dad was back in town, 20 pounds lighter with no explanation, fishing for little loans. When he heard about February's good fortune, he started leaning on North. My own dad had never asked me for anything, and I wondered what it would mean to know him that way. The snow kept coming down. "What are you gonna do?" I said, fanning cupfuls of salt on the concrete. North shrugged. "Give him February." "You can't," I said. North lifted a shovelful and heaved it. "Stop picturing your own dad," he said. By April, February was spent. In May, North asked if his dad could move in. He was much younger in person than North had made him seem. We gave him a closet, but soon his shit was everywhere. "This is temporary," I kept saying. Without snow, the rent outdid us. I caved and made the call. My dad covered most of the summer, treated the three of us to dinner. I'd forgotten how embarrassing it was when he offered to pray over meals. But glancing around the table, I realized everyone was grateful but me. So as you move into the second part of this collection, the friend North takes seasonal work fishing in Alaska and sort of leaves town for the summer. And the speaker is left behind and finds himself sort of grappling with this new loneliness. Since their lifestyle is so specific, they don't really have any other ties to normal society or to other people. So the speaker is kind of left in a very lonely place, and as a way to fill that void, he starts renting out North's bedroom as a bed and breakfast. And so he's kind of finding a way to get people into his life a little bit. And so he has these guests coming to stay with him, and then in the mornings he's cooking them breakfast from food he's finding in the trash. But of course he's not telling them that. So there's a little bit of comic relief in that section. And don't stay at my bed and breakfast is what I'm telling you. But during that section of the book, you get a series of dramatic monologues that are all from the perspectives of the guests who have come to stay at his bed and breakfast. And this next poem is one of those monologues. This is the first guest that comes to stay with him. His name is Lou, and he's in his 70s, and he's in town to bet on horse races. You don't start at zero. You start way below zero. You got your gas money, admission, you grab a dog and a beer and hit the ATM, which takes a not so small fee. By the time you set eyes on horses, you're down to 30, 40 bucks and you haven't even placed a bet. I started coming when my wife died. She wouldn't marry a gambler, so after her funeral was my first chance in 47 years. Oh, I don't bet a lot of money. If you don't bet a lot, you can't make a lot, but you can stay in it. Some guys, they hit the pick three in the superfecta. Those guys are gods. Not me. I just work the chalk and try to stay out of the red. To tide me over, my wife used to let me bet chocolate chips. We'd watch the races on TV and place our bets in bowls. She'd tease me for playing it safe. Loosen up, she'd say. Then she'd put it all on Here Is Happy to Win. She loved that horse. She'd lose, of course, and go make cookies with her losses while I worked the chalk. After 47 years of that, it's hard to remember I'm betting real money, losing real money. When I win, I remember. I can tell you that much. I'll never be a god, but I'm still here. The only god I ever met in person was my wife. No bullshit. She hit the superfecta one time. Filled her bowl on 4 horses and named the order, the exact order, 1, 2, 3, 4, and she won. After we stopped shouting and cussing and jumping up and down, we did a little 2-step right there on the living room rug, and at the end, I even dipped her. She had red hair for miles. It was beautiful. So that's Lou. And I'll give you one more of the monologues. This next character is Oscar. and he's actually the final guest that comes to stay at the bed and breakfast at the end of the summer. And he's sort of a bit more of an unhinged personality. This is Oscar. Fuck no, she didn't leave me over money. She left me because I have no ass. It's true. A belt holds on my hips about as good as an oiled up pole dancer. That's why I invented these strapless suspenders. Can't see them, can you? Good, that's the idea. Almost went bankrupt making the prototype. My wife kept saying, what suspenders? You ain't wearing nothing. But riddle me this, are my jeans pulled at my feet? I swear, bona fide genius dumbfounds belief with simplicity. Same goes for the truth. Like if I told you, my wife left me because I got less milkshake than a garter snake, you'd say, there's gotta be more to that story. Like what? I go to work one day and come back home to no trace of her. No photos, no toothbrush, not even the carrots she raised in the garden beds. Just holes in the earth like buckshot where she plucked them free. And of course, she got custody and the house eventually, which I'll admit, I mortgaged to pay for the patent. You think that was the dagger? I mean, here I am working to cure Otto Pantson for the assless, and she's fussing over a little loan? Yes or no? Could I win her back if I doubled down and got those silicone implants? Fine, shake your head. But I don't think you respect how bad it is when God forgets to blow up your balloons. Hell, I'd show you. But these suspenders, they're a bitch to get back into. So that's why you want to have a bed and breakfast, so you can have these characters come through. But like I said, don't stay at mine. Everybody holding up okay? Poetry is treating you well. I'm going to do a few more for you all. So I hope you enjoy the ride. These last few are from the last section of the book. And I know afterwards, I know Francesca and I will both be very happy to mingle with all of you, meet you all, sign some books if you're interested. And there's snacks in the back. So yeah, we should have a good time. So this book is based on my 20s and kind of the life I was living during those years. When I finished high school, I knew I wanted to go into the arts. And I sort of decided that that meant I would never have any money of any substance, which has proven to be kind of true. It's not a very financially sound choice to go into the arts, certainly not poetry. But I knew I wanted to go into that world, and so I wanted to learn how to scrap for myself better and be self-reliant. And so I went off to a series of wilderness survival schools and sort of studied primitive skills, tracking animals, trapping, shelter building, stuff like that. And somewhat ironically, at those schools, I met a lot of anarchist kids who knew a lot about urban survival techniques. And from those kids, I learned about modern dumpster diving and like all the different types of things you can get. It turns out you can get anything that's for sale can also be found in a dumpster somewhere if you have the patience to go looking for it. And I also learned about hopping freight trains and sort of how to travel for free, and ended up doing a lot of that in my 20s. So the next poem is kind of about an experience I would have commonly on those trips. I did one. This next poem is out of a trip I did in 2009 cross country, and that was about a 6-month trip, mostly bicycling cross country, camping out every night. And I did that 6 months on $200. So that was like the type of money I was working with at that time. That was kind of at my extremity of frugality. But one of my tricks on those trips was hanging out in diners, and when people got up and left, I would like swoop in and eat whatever they left behind. And that was a way to keep the budget low. So yeah, this next one's about something like that. This one's called The Family. In perfect synchrony with the family, rising from the booth and laughing their way toward the door, I ditch my coffee on the counter and slide in where they've been. I wolf the father's Reuben and move to the daughter's grilled cheese. I make quick work of melted milkshakes, no looking up to see if I'm seen. And although I'm counting each second it takes to pound the leftover plates, at the end of it, I wipe my lips with a cloth napkin and linger, letting myself imagine a wife and kids gone on a trip to the bathroom, hot water running as she scrubs Mrs. Butterworth's from their fingers, fixes their hair. The waitress comes for dishes, too involved in her own life to notice I don't have the right clothes, the right face. Yes, I say, we're finished. This next one is something I drafted before the pandemic hit, and as I was putting the book together, I was kind of shocked to realize how much it felt like it really spoke to the pandemic time period and sort of that quarantine time and how much isolation all of us had to experience. So I hope this one will resonate either with that or with other things from your life. This one's called Living Alone. Another day of not seeing anyone but the faces on TV. For company, I record my impressions of celebrities and play them back, but the voices don't sound like them and don't sound like me. I peel an orange and smell my hands. I read portions of a mystery in different rooms to make it feel like different things are happening. The longer I'm alone, the smaller a gesture could be and still console or rattle me. Strange to need so little, but to need it so badly. I step into the air conditioning of Target and ask after brands I know they carried, just to hear someone say yes. Yeah, so I'll do one more piece for you, and then we'll be able to celebrate with some food and drink. I hope y'all enjoying the poems. This one, yes?
Where's the food and drink from?
Good question. Good question. Someone's been listening. Yeah, I'll never tell. No, I didn't provide the food and drink, so I'm wondering too. Yeah, we'll check. Okay. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening. This poem comes near the end of the book and is an epistolary poem, so it's sort of in the form of a letter. This one's called Lay It Bare. I know you're hungry for it. More money, more news, desperate for any laurel that parades you as happier than you know you are. A car, a cruise, some haircut reeking so deeply of depression, no one with a nose could miss it. Making more each year, spending more, the pride of how little time you have to spare. I know I embarrass you, still living on expired food I find, dented tuna I squirrel away, spending at a pace slower than a pulse. Slow, that's what I have. I'm not happy either. I walk past bars where flush people drink, markets where I dumpster what I eat, down streets quiet enough to hush the last 10 years, parks dark enough to find Gemini, Lyra. I don't wish you were poor. I wish you were here. Thank you.
Oh.